Moin! Hello everyone,
Moin.
welcome to the 17th episode of DoubleDM podcast, where Niels and I discuss D&D and every other TTRPG for that matter in a meta sense. We talk about what we feel about, how we feel about things, how we think about certain stuff. So, Niels, how are you today?
Yes, I can't complain.
Really?
I'm a little nervous, but not that much because I'm getting my Corona or COVID-19 vaccine, my first shot today.
Which vaccine are you getting?
Moderna. Biotech Moderna. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but just because I don't like needles, that's all. Not because I'm afraid of the vaccine or anything. Just
Afraid of the
I hate
biochips
needles.
they're gonna put into you, so you can.
Hey, I mean free Windows. I don't complain. Yeah.
As long as as long as it's not in iOS, it's all good, right?
Exactly. But how are you?
Oh, I'm very good, very very good. I have my meta session I talked about in the last episode on Sunday, and I'm a little nervous too because my players have voiced that they don't know how this is gonna go and expect it to go badly. I am very much against that thought. I think they are gonna do great. It's gonna be great, in my opinion. And for those that don't know what this is, it's my players got a little sidetracked and forgot a lot of the information we have in our story. And I can understand that I could give them all the information, but I want them to more or less to tell me where the holes in their story are and fill them up again, so we can play the story like it's supposed to. Because I know normally I should just let my players take the story where they want to go, but if they don't want to go anywhere anymore, I need to intervene as a DM in some way. So we have this session where they are gonna talk about all the information they have and basically get a common ground between each other. And then I can intervene at certain points to set the record straight, because they obviously their characters would know information, but my players forgot it. And now I'm the one that more or less is filling up the gaps they have.
Yeah, I think it's just an awesome opportunity for your players to get their facts straight. You don't really have to be embarrassed about forgetting things, because we all do, let's be honest.
Yeah, that's true, but still, it's not something I would usually do in a campaign, because it breaks the campaign in some sense. Because I think it's also very fun if your players forget about certain things and you can bring them back against them. But this is nothing of the sort. Basically, I gave them information about certain cult leaders and what they want to do, right? Where they want to go. They forgot that these cult leaders even existed. I can't more or less steer them to the place where the cult leader is supposed to show up and make it a surprise that this cult leader shows up. They wouldn't even know it's a cult leader. That's the problem here. They forgot basically everything information they could have gotten, that they have gotten. So it's hard to put this really back together, and this is why we're doing this.
Yeah, and if I agree with you that sometimes meta sessions can break campaigns, but if not doing a meta session breaks the campaign even more, because the campaign can't go forward because they don't have their information straight, it's definitely the lesser evil, if you like to say it.
Yeah.
But I think it's not an evil per se doing something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft released this week.
Yeah.
I've been hearing a lot of good things about it, I would say. A lot of people seem to enjoy reading the book for now. Some people complained that there weren't too many stat blocks in it, if I recall correctly. Basically giving you, because you have these domains of dread, right? These domains like Strahd's domain is. And basically you don't have stat blocks for these rulers and the people in these domains necessarily. Just a lot of flavor information. This is all just what I read on Twitter, so this could all be wrong. But yeah, I think it's surprising. I don't necessarily don't like it actually, because not giving us the stat blocks forces or leads DMs to basically try their own hand on creating these villains and monsters their own way and make the campaigns even uniquer. Obviously, it's also a little bad because you don't have any direction to go. Like Strahd has a stat block you can use, a vampire stat block. So basically giving us these villains, but with a basis stat block where you can basically then give, okay, maybe this villain can cast higher level spells than the normal monster they are based on, and so forth. But if you have nothing, it can be quite hard to actually get started doing it.
It can be quite overwhelming, actually. But I think this is definitely nothing for newer DMs, because you have got to have some sort of experience when designing monsters or stat blocks for those or villains from the scratch. If you modify stat blocks, that's easy enough to do. But creating something from scratch, from nothing, from just a little flavor text, can be quite hard, I think. And regarding creating something from scratch, I did something in this regard. I created some sort of half-Oni race with a friend of mine. We talked about it yesterday evening a bit and tweaked it here and there. But I think the way it is now, it's not the strongest, but it is fun, I think. Or it could be, at least. Yeah, and we are planning to create a class, an entirely new class as well. Yeah. And the race, I think I will release it soon, but we have to write some flavor stuff and do a little bit of art and a little thing here and a little thing there until it can be, or until it is done, if you want to say it like that.
Yeah. About homebrewing stuff, just make the stuff fun. like I saw the race and I knew you did this because you are interested in the Oni lore and myth. So this more or less came naturally to you to think about this.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was fun looking at it. I quite enjoyed the unique ability you gave this race.
Thanks a lot.
It's not something I've ever seen on the released races.
Yeah, me neither. That's why I thought to do it kind of like this. You will see soon. Guys, you will see soon.
Yeah. Yeah, we also, after you get your shot today, we have a Witcher campaign game again. Finally.
Yeah, and I'm fucking excited.
I am too.
I'm terrified, but I'm excited.
So, last session we left off with you guys fleeing Novigrad.
Yeah.
Rescuing some mages. Going to Oxenford for more information and safety. While you were going there, Layla, the human bard of the party, got marked by something you only know as a returner. That basically forces people to sleepwalk into the woods and never return.
Yeah.
Totally terrified, you guys went further to Oxenford. You went to sleep there again, and when the Witcher Virion woke up, Layla was gone.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Your and Alia, your human mage's thoughts going into this session?
My thoughts as a player was is holy shit, what the fuck, what happened? Well, I guess we gotta wander off into the woods and find her. And I think, has Alia awakened yet?
No, Ali is still asleep.
Then he's still dreaming about stuff, going back home. But if he wakes up, he's gonna be terrified because he always thought of it as a myth since we heard about the returners.
Mm-hmm.
Or like some spooky stories like we Germans used to tell our kids not wander off into the woods, or do as we say, or as their parents say, or something. But now it's getting a little real for him. And I think he grew attached to the whole party, to Vurian and Layla. And I think he will try to save her no matter what. In a sense, to prove his worth to his fiance's family as well. So, like, you see, I can protect her, I can do this, I can do that, I am worthy to be with her, and yeah, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then let me ask you, what are your thoughts on how we did last session?
So since this campaign is very short, aka around 8 to 10 sessions, you guys have already more or less completed 2 of the objectives I gave you. Of the few objectives I want you to before we finish this campaign. One being helping the mages.
Which we did.
Or not helping the mages, but helping the mage in Triss Marigold.
Yeah.
While the second objective was for you to find out that this human monster transformation thing is something that you have never seen before.
Which we also did.
And also occurs more often than once.
Yeah. That's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I think even the Witcher is a little terrified, although he's always sleepy and doesn't seem that interested, but I think he's a little terrified of suddenly people turning into monsters, and monsters can occur everywhere, like with the snap of a finger, suddenly, boom, Pesta, or Grave Witch, or whatever. Yeah, that's not good.
I will give this hint to you because maybe you as the mage might be the one that's most keen to pick this up.
Mm-hmm.
You have found out that humans transform into monsters. But you still haven't found out how and why. The why is obvious, but the how is important.
Yeah.
And
but we have to encounter some monsters, I think, again, or maybe the Returner questline gives us hints about it, and then we can stop it, or at least put some other more capable individuals on it, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be interesting how all this stuff unfolds.
The how they transform is the most important part, actually. Or paying attention to looking back on the people that transformed may be important.
All right. I will try to keep that in mind. And regarding unfolding things,
yes,
I think we should get into today's topic.
Yes, we should.
Which is kind of related to that, because today we are going to talk about the pros and cons, or the
differences of planning and improv.
Yeah, exactly.
A session, a campaign, whatever. So, last week, Hamilton from Dragon's Duel was on the show and said that in his opinion, the secret to being a good GM is not saying I railroad my players or I improv everything and write my story around the players. It's balancing everything on this one single pin in the middle, and every scale needs to be balanced somewhat on this pin. You can put a lot of weight, for example, on being an improv DM. You can improvise a lot, but you still have to reward somewhat. You still have to put your player. You still have to do. You can be high combat or low combat. You can balance this. A good DM just isn't someone that basically deals. A DM is not a Sith. A DM does not deal in absolutes.
Exactly.
You need to have balance.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of that statement?
I think this is exactly right, because there is no time for you as a DM to plan every little possibility, because you fucking can't, because players are still players. And even myself as a mostly DM, but when I play, I just lose like 10 int. That's, you do batshit crazy stuff because it looks cool, or you think it will work, but it definitely won't. So you gotta you gotta improvise to some extent. And I think as long as the session or the campaign or whatever is somewhat balanced between those two, it is definitely right. Because you can't plan everything, but you can't improvise a whole campaign out of nothing. You need some sort of anchor points to build your story up. That's kind of what I think about this statement. What are your thoughts?
I, like you, very much agree with the statement, because it is, in my opinion, very important. Like I said in the combat episode, for example, it's very important to know what you're doing. You should you saying combat, for example, is hard and you don't do it because it's boring is, my opinion, wrong. Because you want combat, then you want combat to be boring. You can, if you want to make it interesting, you can, and this is the thing of balancing the scale. You can have very little combat, but you can also have a lot of combat, and both DMs are first of all, in their own right, completely a good DM, because everyone's a good DM if they bring fun to their players, no matter what they do.
And don't forget to bring fun to yourself.
Yes, you need to have fun as well. But a DM I think bringing fun to my players is bringing them a little bit of everything. So bringing them some combat so they can have the joy of rolling dice, because let's be honest, rolling dice is quite exciting.
Yeah, math rocks make click-click noises.
Exactly, like math rocks make click-click noises. But also, I give my players a lot of conversation, a lot of political intrigues, information they can use to steer the story in any way. This is interesting, because I balanced this. I gave them combat, but I also gave them the information. There is no absolute, I only do this because I can't, you don't need to just do one of the two to have an interesting game. If this is the game you want, then you can do that, basically your 100-0 split. That's okay. But I think balancing it all so your players get everything and it feels right in the story, obviously, then that story is gonna be much more interesting to tell.
Yeah. And regarding the split, how much of your games are improv and how much are planned?
This depends a lot. I would say it's a quite even 50-50 split, or something along the lines of a fair split. I know that humans don't really. Humans basically only deal in 100-0, 90-10, 50-50. There is no other real split we normally have. Yeah. If we think about stuff. But I would say around 50-50, 60-40 in both directions a little bit. Like, I plan a lot, but the planning is mostly to to strengthen my improv. Basically, I plan NPCs, names, descriptions of those that I then can use to describe the NPC my players are going to interact with. I plan the information they have. I plan where they are going to be found. I plan the city my players are moving to. But they have the possibility to do whatever they want with that, you could say.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you plan the framework of your story and improv everything else in between.
Yeah.
Or most of the time in between. Because having a good framework, as we talked about in our story arcs episode, is really, really important. But over-planning it isn't a good thing either. So you need some sort of framework, and then you can fill in the gaps with things your players do, because you don't have only one driving force for the story, because you have the DM and the players.
Yeah.
So you have to improvise at some point.
This is exactly what I also wanted to say. You don't, like, a lot of people's, like we said with Hamilton, you can't deal in absolutes. Never ever you can. Like, if you're a DM that says I 100% plan my games, then you're writing a book, not a TTRPG adventure. If you say a 100% improv, that's also wrong. It's a little bit less wrong, I would say, because it doesn't feel quite as wrong as the I 100% plan everything and basically hand my players just a script they can read, which would be 100% planning. But again, you're the DM. You have a more higher position than your players in the game. You plan some stuff, even if it's just the session when you play. That's,
or even just the monster stats that you prepare. That's some sort of planning.
You don't even have to prepare them. Like, there are DMs that don't even prepare monster stats. They just basically let the players roll and hit and say, yeah, that hits and whatever. Like, but a DM always does some planning in some sense. You can say you are definitely an improvising DM nearly all the time, but you can't be 100% improvising, because then you wouldn't be a DM. As a DM, you always have this top-down view into the world, next to being this just a person at a table, but you always have this view behind the screen. You always are the one behind the curtain and on stage. You are that connection of world to players. You always have some sort of planning, because a total improv would be just coming there and having a chat with your friends.
Yeah.
You can,
which you don't need a rule set for.
Interesting. Exactly, that's what I want to say. If you have a rule system prepared to play the game, you have done planning. You planned inside that rule set, because you have those rules. You as the DM are more or less knowing of those. Every time you ask a player to make a roll for something, you are planning that they can fail and not. That's not improvising in a sense anymore. I like, this sounds wrong, but this is for me, like, this is a little bit wishy-washy, you could say, because this is me saying you are not 100% improvising, but what I'm suggesting are basically things that nobody would call any sort of planning as well. Like, you don't need to plan a dungeon. You don't need to plan an adventure. You can pull that out of your ass. You can. Trust me, I did it before. But
yeah, it's actually not that hard.
But again, planning, you always do some sort of planning. Be it getting the characters and starting to think about what to do with those. Planning does not mean writing something down or setting it in stone. Planning does just mean that you make thoughts about the game. So everyone plans a little bit. And I think everyone can agree that you at least plan somewhat, but you also improv, and it's both completely fine.
Yeah, definitely. But you need to make a game good or so. To make it interesting, you need a bit of both, because you should have some sort of direction where it should head or should be heading. That's the right phrase.
Yeah.
But everything in between is depending on what your players do and you acting on the information your players give you with their actions.
Exactly.
So, do you have any interesting, funny, or good stories that show good planning or good improv on your side?
Oh, yes. I've had, for example, a good planning story was I did a mystery one-shot once in a system called Bubblegum Shoe. It's this teen sleuth investigation game, and I basically made it a little bit of horror. This was me really planning every step of the way for my players. Obviously, there were also improv in this. I also needed to improvise NPCs and locations, but generally I had every scene planned because I wanted this to feel a lot more like a movie of some sort.
Some sort of theater play.
Yeah, exactly. That.
Yeah.
It was called Mystery in Shawmore Bay, and all of my players I have had at the table, which were 5. 5. Some of them are listening to this podcast, and also listening to this episode, and I know, at least I hope, they loved it. Like, they always told me they loved this one, and it was such a great story we told, because I did planning for 3 whole months on this.
That's crazy.
The idea started 5 months before we actually played. I then made a lot of light planning, like, okay, I wanted to have this and this, just jotting down notes. Then the end time of a semester for university came for all of us, and I was like, okay, I read the story now, wrote the story, made the character. This time I made characters for my players to choose from, because I wanted them to more or less fill roles. I know, like, and a lot of people say this does not bring fun to them, and I can tell you, it brought a lot of fun to us. It's not something I would usually do for a campaign, because my players didn't have a lot of agency creating their characters. But they have had a lot of fun playing the roles and I didn't even assign them. I basically gave the first person to arrive the option to choose whichever character they want. And this went down. So they had the agency to choose what they wanted to play. And they all got like the normal teen movie or teen TV series roles. We had the popular girl, we had the jock, we had the nerd, we had the criminal.
Of course.
And we had an occult kid for the story to work a little bit better. And yeah, it was great. I've had this was 12 hours long, mind you. Yeah, this was not a 4-hour one shot. This was 12 hours us sitting in a room. This was brought to a halt by a 1-hour cooking break where we cooked our own burritos, I think.
Yeah, burritos always work.
No, we didn't make burritos. We made noodles. Burritos was one other time. But this showed a lot of great planning from me, I would say, because I planned the story. I carefully selected every music bit and basically timed music with my descriptions to make it seem more epic. I planned every location to placing every door on walls. I placed sound effects everywhere. Like, I made a lot of planning so that my players feel as immersed as they can, and it worked.
That's nice.
So, while I had a story about a lot of planning, do you have a story on a lot of improv?
Actually, I only have a story about improv.
Perfect.
Because once I was at some friend's house and we wanted to play D&D with John as a DM, who was on the show in episode 3. But as we all know John, he didn't show up for 5 hours. Just the classic John. So we made characters and I just pulled a whole one-shot out of my ass.
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at the monster manual, flipped through it. Okay, that sounds good. Let's take that. While the others made characters and just threw it at them. And it was a fun one-shot for 5 hours, which just came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
We just had some classic ambient stuff, music, like a bit dark.
You
and
found on
broody
YouTube or somewhere, Spotify, basically just
some nature sound, something like that. Nothing too spectacular, nothing too planned. Just like, I wanted to have some sort of soundscape in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just said, you start in this and that location. Where do you want to go? We didn't even have a setting per se. We didn't even have, we weren't playing in Faerun or in
just
my homebrew world.
A forest, right?
Just, you start in a tavern by the road. What do you do? Yeah, and I think we made it a level 5 one-shot. But that was fun.
Level 5 is a good level, I think. It gives you as a DM a lot of things you can use.
You can throw that much more funny shit at the players and see them struggle and laugh your fucking ass
very
off.
Good for players, because level 5 is basically a level where they have to know certain things about their character, but not too much that it's overwhelming if you basically do this on a whim.
Exactly.
I also have a story on Improv. Oh, wait, no. I want to ask you first. What was the actual story you improvised? You started in a tavern, but what happened?
Suddenly the tavern was attacked by a Draco Lich kind of thing. And burned the whole tavern down, and my players had to find out who this character was who set the Draco, or who awakened the Draco Lich, because there was someone behind it. An even powerful high-level Lich, but this was kind of the long-term goal if we would have played that out in a longer campaign. But so they went following the Draco Lich to some extent, but it was too fast for them. But they found some clues here and there and traveled from town to town to ask about strange occurrences in the last few days, or strange sightings. And acting on that, clearing a dungeon, I just made up. We had a piece of paper where I just, it's all in the fog of war, of course, and I just drew some dungeon rooms, which I felt like, that could go here, and then, But I didn't use any traps in the dungeon, because traps require a little more planning, I think. Because just putting a trap there to put a trap there isn't really that cool, in my opinion. I don't like it that much. But that's basically one improv thing I did. Just pulling a whole session out of my ass.
Nice.
Yeah.
I also have a story on improv, like I said. Also included John from episode 3.
Yeah.
We had a session planned on a day. We planned because we only play this campaign like once every 3 or 4 months. It's a lot, like we play 8 to 12 hour sessions. So this is us meeting up at like 10 a.m. You know John. I know John.
Yeah.
The listeners don't. John is a person that cannot wake up before 1 a.m.
And 1 a.m. is early for him.
Yeah. No,
that's like for us 6 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
John
1
is a person that is notoriously for coming too late. And we expected him to come late that day. But another player had to cancel because of stomach pains and an infection. So we were only down to 3 players, and it was basically we have a rule in our group: if 1 player is missing, we will still play. If 2 players are missing, we reschedule. John wrote. John didn't came to the session, not even half an hour late, and we waited for him. So, what we said is we can either go home now with two of us, because we were playing at a friend's house who was the DM for that, or we play something. And I was like, hey, I have a few adventures on backlog, like pre-made modules for the game. I could run one of this for you guys. Do you have characters? And they both basically pulled out character sheets. The one friend pulled out the character that he actually is playing in that game we were supposed to play, and played it. I was like fine with that. He basically redacted some points, so it's basically playing before the story of the actual game the campaign we're playing. Is the one shot is set before that, and the other pulled out just some other character that fit. So we had
most of the TTRPGs players have like a big stack of backup characters.
Yeah, it wasn't even a backup character. Yeah. He played that character in the campaign once, and they just pulled it out, and it was great. So I basically flipped to the first page of the module, read the first text, and then closed the module down again, more or less, and let my players do what they wanted to do. I've had this planned adventure before me, right? I didn't use much of it. I improvised a lot of stuff basically in between, because I didn't have the time to actually read what was going on in the adventure. Like, I didn't get, like, at the beginning there were information what is going to happen in the end, and why is it, and the reason why this thing that is happening in the beginning is happening is reasoned in those information about what's happening later. But I didn't have the time to read that, so I basically made stuff up. So my players went through, and it was amazing, because if you have small group, there is bound to be way more interaction between one another, because you don't have if you have 6 players at the table, which is my standard, you have people that if people want to do stuff, they're gonna do it alone. Like, some people will be left out of certain activities because of the nature of 6 players at the table. Like, if you want to sneak into a house and steal stuff, it's mostly a 1 or 2 player thing, not a 6-man mission.
Because you don't sneak into a house with a fucking group.
Yeah, exactly. So with only 2 players, there's way lot more interaction between the two, and a lot more things they do together. And it worked great, because they knew I didn't have this planned at all. Like, this was on a whim, because we didn't want to go home and try again next week or something.
Yeah.
We just wanted to play, and we did, and it was great. I think we lasted 5 hours instead of the 8 to 12 we planned, because it was just a one shot. But
5 hours pulling stuff out of your ass that's crazy.
It was amazing. It was so amazing, because it started with them just jogging through a forest, then finding a lake with someone in it, basically diving down to the bottom and never returning. There was a tree. The tree was from the module, and the person diving down too, but basically everything around them after that was made up by me. Like, the forest, the location, and all that stuff was more or less made up. And the tree was a tree monster. And in that game, you have a certain value of toughness. And that toughness is good against spells and poisons. This tree has a toughness of 10, which basically means every spell you do has a negative modifier of minus 10.
Wow.
That's big for characters of, let's say, level 4 or 5. Minus 10 to your roll on this tree to hit is disgusting. And then my players dived down into this into the Feywild, and there they met a lot of interesting people and interesting things, and I made stuff up. Like, one had a carpet. My players bought a fucking carpet from a carpet maker, not a carpenter, but a carpet maker, which was crazy, because he had carpets, but I never intended for my players to buy them, obviously. And then I improvised this lot of stuff because you had this whole lot of factions with this fairy queen in the middle, and you had to fight this weird bug underneath the Feywild to basically make everyone whole again. And it was like, it was very magical experience because it was the first time I basically had a module, and I flipped through it and read some pages out of it, but basically couldn't have closed down and just talked to my players, which was great. So again, now showcasing, every DM can do both. For everyone, certain things seem a little bit more intimidating, like doing a lot of improv without planning. What if it isn't good, right? I've had that same anxiety every time.
I still have it.
Yeah.
Every day. Yeah.
Trust me, you're gonna do fine. You're not gonna do great at first. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, it's a skill. You have to evolve it. You have to practice it. Yeah. But you are perfect if you are just doing it, because not doing it isn't good, if you know what I mean. You have to work that skill to improve in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like with everything else, if you get your driver's license, the first driving lesson, you will be driving like shit. Because you have never driven before. But after you went to driving school and get your driver's license, you know how to drive. And even after that, you have the license to drive. But if you just keep on driving, you get better and better and better every time you get into the car. It's just the nature of humans evolving skills and getting better.
But you have to remember, because a lot of people say I might not do as good as some other people do. Yes, obviously. Like, if you think you're gonna do Matt Mercer level improv or Matt Mercer level storytelling at the beginning of your career in DMing, even if it isn't a career, but if you at the beginning of DMing, no, you're not. That man is an actor. He's a voice actor. He has learned that stuff. He has perfected that craft for himself.
I think he went to acting school. Of Travis Willingham, for example, as well.
This is normal.
They learn improv there.
They learn
this
shit.
This is a skill they learn at school, and basically.
You don't even have to go to school for that. Don't get me wrong. They learned that professionally for other stuff. You only need to play. Just be confident. I know it's hard. I am not confident in myself all the time. This is also for me. But being confident...
We always bully you into being confident. Just fucking be confident. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Trust me, your players will think the same way.
Take it at a pace you can manage. Don't dive deep if you don't want to. Do it at a pace you feel comfortable with, and you will realize over time you get better. Just trust yourself, because you can do it.
Exactly.
So, how do you combine improv and planning into your games? How do they work together? Because they are two building blocks of the game, or of the games we play, of the general structure. How do you combine them to the best of your ability, to the best of its effect?
It depends on what I'm playing. If I play in my homebrew world, I don't have to plan as much because I made a lot of planning creating the world. So I know how everything or most of the things work. And if I don't, I just improvise it and say, yeah, it was planned all along because it's my world. And even then, now it is planned. But in a story kind of way, I build a framework. Like, I build the start of the campaign, how they meet. And I build the end, like where it should lead. And some anchor points in between. Like, to do the end goal, you have to achieve this and this, or different kind. As I give my players, or plan for my players, to have multiple options as anchor points to achieve the same goal. But everything else in between, I react to what my players do with the information they get. For example, in the Icewind Dale campaign I'm running right now, I gave them the first quest outright. Yeah, that's what you gotta do. And after that, I just gave them rumors. I plan multiple anchor points and locations and quests, but improvising everything in between what they do with those rumors. Most of the time, they have ignored it until now. But we are just 3 sessions in, so there's still room to grow. But yeah, I plan major towns, settlements, and major dungeons. But everything else, just go with the flow, do what I feel like it. Flip through the monster lists in Icewind Dale in the monster manual, seeing what could fit, changing things here and there to fit the narrative better, and combining backstories into the sessions at places they fit narratively. If they have a quest to do it to do something as fast as possible, I can't let them, or I could let them, but I don't want to give them something out of the backstory because it would diminish what they are trying to do right now, which is also important. So I like to wait until the quest is done, or at least the time bit is done, to engage with my players in that way.
Like again, we already said that planning most of the time helps improv. You have a start point, you have an end point, you have some building blocks in between, but how your players basically jump from point to point is their way of doing it. And
especially because you can't predict combat in most of the time.
Again, in general, you can't predict the dice roll. If there's been going around this discussion in the D&D community or general TTRPG community, is there even failure in your games? And I'm like, yes, obviously. If you fail a die roll, that roll is failed. Obviously, that discussion goes way deeper into what happens if your players get killed and TPK. But in general, like, if there is no failure when I give a challenge to my players, like there's a wall, like a 1x2 wall, and my players stand in front of it. Do I need them to make a die roll because they can walk around it? And it's like this. Then I wouldn't even ask them to roll because it's just unnecessary failure. Obviously, if my players do some fun stuff, I'm gonna give them a die roll for the lulz of it. But if we're talking about the real story, I will never build failure in that isn't necessary, because a die roll for me always means if you roll a nat 1 on a die roll while climbing, you will slip. In some sense, I won't kill you outright for nat 1. Obviously, don't get that. But you will maybe hurt yourself, fall down. Maybe another player needs to save you, but you won't die outright from a single die roll. That's a 5% chance of failure, of death. Never ever. Yeah. But there is always this chance of failure when I ask you to roll.
So failure needs some sort of consequence.
If a player has a plus 15 to perception and the DC and the enemy is stealthing and has a 15 die roll, the player doesn't need to roll anymore. I will probably let them roll just for them to see to roll what they want, because the net 20 is also always there, meaning some sort of extra effect. And you will spot this person with a net 1. Even my group plays with net 1 is always a failure. But even then, I'm like, okay, yes, you spot this person, but you don't spot them soon enough. They have achieved something. Like, okay, they were sneaking to your left through the garden. Okay, now they have reached the point where they wanted to go. what do you do now? You will spot them, but net one always gives some sort of extra disadvantage, you could say, to the situation. But in general, I will never let my players fail randomly on stuff. If in my opinion the failure isn't for basic, if the role is just for funs, a failure is just for funs. Like, if they are in a tavern and are having an arm wrestling match, even the puny wizard can beat the Goliath barbarian if the Goliath barbarian also won, just for fun, because this is just fun. This has nothing to do with a big story. But never, if you are climbing a steep mountain, I will never ask you to roll to see if you just fail for the lulz of it. I will ask you to roll to see if you fall down, if you get exhaustion for that part of the climb. That's meaningful failure. And because you can't plan for this stuff to happen, for die rolls for die rolls to go badly, you need to improv always. You always have some sort of way you always need some sort of free way to basically steer the story. This. So. Okay, yeah?
Yeah?
No.
Are there anything that is easier for you to plan than not? Or improvise?
I find it very easy to plan sessions in general. Again, this planning of, I know where the session starts because where we left off last time. This is always easy to plan. And then plan where I want the session to go, the direction. That's easy to plan because I can have a lot of tools I can use to steer my players in the right direction. I also like to plan, which is a little bit harder, but also is NPCs. I love planning NPCs, interesting NPCs, not just this myth on the road they encounter, which is just another dwarf that makes armor, but an interesting tavern owner that has some scars from a battle or something, that has seen adventure, that has a personality. That's something I really love planning and do a lot. And because I do it a lot, it becomes easier and easier and easier. I love improvising combats. Yeah. Which is a little bit contradictory to our combat episode. Because I said you can plan a lot of combat. And I normally don't do random encounters, but I don't mean that. But I can improv in a combat. So having these wolves attack my party, and when I throw them at my party, I've planned for them to be basically a pack. They have an alpha and all that stuff. And then that alpha gets killed. And then I improv what the wolves will do because of how the fight has evolved. Like, again, combat is always a little bit of improvising because, like, there's a certain situation going on. The situation has a history. Like, you need to look back to how the combat started and how it's going to this point. And then at a certain point, I make a decision. And that decision is improvised. So the alpha of the wolves is killed. What do the rest of the wolves do? Do they know they can still beat the enemy and avenge their alpha and choose another alpha, or do they run away? Or how do they continue the fight? Yeah. And that is always improvised for me, because those monsters need to improvise in that moment. The monsters probably didn't plan for their alpha animal to go down, so what do they do now? This is a situation you need to make on the fly, or I make on the fly. And this is always very easy for me, because I do the planning beforehand, how the monsters behave in combat, and then I can make on that information on how they behave and how they have behaved until this point to make that improvisation.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Same question to you.
There's not much of a difference between us in this point, but I like to improvise NPCs. even interesting ones. I made up a special priest, the high priest of the Order of the One God in my homebrew world, on the fly because they wanted to go to a temple and ask some stuff, and then I just made up an NPC. But he was unique in some sort of way because he had tattoos, which usually priests in this country don't, or especially from this god. And so I improvised some sort of backstory, which I then can use to plan the NPC and the story of the NPC better. Yeah, and planning for me feels easy regarding general schemes for big bets. Like, I make mind maps and stuff like that, how the villain's organization is structured. So who has the say in what sort of regard and who can give orders to who, and yeah, that's something I really enjoy.
To turn that question a little bit around, like, I hate improvising interesting NPCs.
Yeah.
Because it's just not what I can do good. I'm very bad at improvising an interesting NPC, like a major NPC. I can improvise them to some extent, but they will always, for me at least, feel dull and boring as an NPC, even if they are, because they are so major. I put a lot of thought into how they act, and basically improvising them on the spot will make them, for me, feel like the next Smith on the road, who's not much an interesting person. Like, I've made some good NPCs on the fly, but I always feel like if I make them on the fly, they will not feel as good as if I meticulously plan at least the building stones again. Like again, we've told this the whole episode, and this is basically also the advice we can give. Use planning to base your improvisation, because improvising a story is, in my opinion, a lot better for your players, because they are forces you can't control. In a book, you can control the protagonist if you are the author. You can't control your players, the main characters. You can't control them. So improvising around them is good, but they also need to walk on something, the ground. And that ground is something you can plan. You can plan. You can do the world building around them. You can place NPCs wherever you want. You can create a city next to them. That is planning. That is the base planning. And then improvise in that setting you created around your players, so they have the ability to move. Like, again, your players need to obey the laws of physics of your world, or the laws of magic, or whatever laws you have to basically keep the world in some sort of common ground. Those laws are you as the DM. You create this world around them. They create the story in them. And that is where you improv. But you need to create the rules that allow them to do that.
So basically, plan your building blocks and have them at your disposal. When you need them, you can just improvise out of them because you made a lot of planning beforehand. So you can just grab the thing you need and throw it at the players.
Like, you can plan the NPC that your players are gonna meet in a session or something, a wizard in a wizard tower, blah, blah, blah. But planning the city the wizard is in, and saying it has a wizard tower, there lives a wizard. That is also completely fine, because then you can improvise, because your players might not even want to visit that wizard if they are not important to the story for them. So you don't need to plan them meticulously. But having the building block of there is a wizard in this town is all the information your players need to make the choice to go to the wizard.
Exactly.
So again, giving building blocks is the best way to plan. Having these building blocks made by you, you can always plan a lot of stuff on these building blocks if you want. But every DM needs to do some building block planning. And then you can basically do on those building blocks, you can do the improv and planning you want to do. You will always have some improv, because obviously die rolls, player actions, all that stuff, there will always be some sort of things you don't expect and have to accustom to. But you have these two bars at the bottom, which are the building blocks you plan, and at the top where you have this where you have this sky's the limit improv. Those two. And between that you can do whatever you want. You can plan a lot of stuff, you can improv a lot of stuff, whatever fits your style and your player's style. So to create the best story you want possible. If your players are the type of players that don't do much on their own, you need to give them a quest, you need to give them a story hint and all that stuff. If they are the ones that basically go active into the world and engage with it more, then you don't even need to do that. So find the style that works best for you and your players, do the base planning, expect the improvisation, and then just have fun. Like we always say, just have fun.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for me, there are some things I struggle with regarding planning, especially political intrigue is something I'm not that good at yet. Mm-hmm. But I enjoy stories around political intrigue. So I just have to do it, but I'm terribly bad at it right now. But I'm working on it. And I have some things planned for some other groups, and I think it will be quite all right.
Okay. Nice.
I will just draw everything from political drama, TV series, and movies I like, and just mangle them up together and throw the shit at the wall and see what sticks.
I can see that. That's nice.
Yeah. So I think, or no, is there anything you struggle with planning or improvising, except major NPCs?
Major NPCs a lot. Basically, that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm. So I think we should get to an end soon.
Yeah.
So basically, our tips or our conclusion of this episode is you can't just improv, or you can't just railroad in a game of TTRPGs, because you have two driving forces, the DM and the players. And if you want to make the game interesting, you have to react to what your players do. And basically build a framework, plan a framework around it with some anchor points, and fill the gaps with your improv. And don't worry if you're not good at improv yet, just do it. You will get better, you'll get more confident in it, and then it will be a lot of fun to do it. Did I miss anything?
Actually, I don't think so.
Alrighty. So, we are at the end of the episode, and you should follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DoubleDM Pod. We also have a YouTube channel, also at DoubleDM Pod.
Nope. Just search DoubleDM on YouTube.
All right.
Or go to our link tree to be found on Twitter, where you can find the YouTube channel.
Yeah. Also on there you can find our anchor link, where everything else is linked to, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I think meanwhile Deezer should be up.
Yeah.
Google Podcast, all that good stuff.
All podcast platforms.
And our Discord server.
Yes.
Where we would like to interact with you guys.
If you always have a question for us, Discord is probably the best way, asking us. If you want to start a discussion, we've had some interesting discussions in the past on the server, in the general channel, where people, because our guests we have had on the show or will have on the show are in the server, you can interact with them and see what they think of certain topics. Maybe even we will make your topic into an episode if we find it interesting, or not interesting enough, because every topic is interesting. But if you have something that we can make into a 1-hour episode, we will do that. So
Definitely.
Come to the Discord server and have fun with us. Maybe sign up for an episode if you feel like it. And you can always reach us on Twitter.
Or just hang out, interact, chat. We're all down for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, and hear you on the next one.
See you on the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.